$12, huh? The billionaire's voice dripped ice. He towered over the old dishwasher, Carlos, whose hands trembled worse than usual. Ella, balancing a tray heavy with dirty dishes, should have kept walking. Needed to. Lily's medicine didn't pay for itself, but something snapped when she saw the shame in Carlos's eyes. She knew secrets about surviving this world, secrets the city's elite couldn't fathom. "Sir, it was an accident," she said, her voice a tremor of defiance. He learned soon enough, though, that her quiet compassion was a power he couldn't buy. A transformation was coming. They had no idea, not a clue. But then a waitress, a single mother, living on the edge of desperation with a secret of her own, did the unthinkable. She stepped between them. She had no idea that this single act of courage, this choice to defend a stranger, wouldn't just cost her a job she desperately needed. It would shatter her world and rebuild it in a way she could never have imagined. What would you risk for a stranger? Stick around to find out. The air in Arya was a carefully curated symphony. It tasted of money and saffron, smelled of $100 perfume and seared scallops, and hummed with a low, confident murmur of people who never had to check a price tag. For Ella Jensen, it was the sound of survival. Each clink of a fork against a plate was a fraction of a dollar towards her daughter Lily's next medical bill. Each polite, self-easing smile she offered was a shield against the crushing weight of her reality. At 28, Ella felt 1,000 years old. She moved with an economy of motion, learned from years of balancing trays and expectations. Her uniform, a crisp black dress and apron starched to the stiffness of cardboard, was her armor. Beneath it, she was a ghost of a different woman, a woman who once dreamed in vibrant oil paints and charcoal smudges. That woman had won a scholarship to the Rhode Island School of Design. That woman had believed her hands were for creating, not for clearing away the half-eaten entree of the city's elite. Then came Lily, and with Lily a love so fierce it eclipsed every other dream. And shortly after Lily's diagnosis, a rare persistent pediatric asthma that clung to her small lungs like a persistent fog, requiring nebulizers, specialist visits, and a cocktail of medications that cost more per month than Ella's rent. The art scholarship was deferred, then abandoned. The canvases were sold. The dream was packed away in a dusty box, replaced by the relentless, grinding pragmatism of keeping her child breathing. Tonight was a Tuesday, typically a slower night, but a new tech merger had filled every table with sharp suits and celebratory toasts. Ella weaved through the maze of tables, her mind a super compute of orders, allergies, and water refills. "Yes, Mr. Henderson, right away. Of course, Mrs. Albright, the Sauvignon Blanc." She was good at her job. She was invisible, efficient, and pleasant, the holy trinity of a top-tier server. Her boss, Mr. Sterling, a man whose smile never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes, considered her a reliable cog in his well-oiled machine. He didn't know that every time she passed the bar, she saw the deep, rich reds of the wine and remembered mixing the perfect shade of crimson for a sunset. He didn't know that the rhythmic chopping from the kitchen was a painful echo of the day she sold her easel. In the back, in the steam-filled, chaotic heart of Arya, was Carlos, a man in his late 60s, with hands gnarled by decades of hard labor and a gentle, weary kindness in his eyes. He'd come from El Salvador 30 years ago, sending money home to a family he hadn't seen in a decade. He was the restaurant's dishwasher, the lowest rung on the ladder. Yet he was the only one who ever asked Ella how Lily was doing. His brow furrowed with genuine concern. He'd sometimes slip her a small misshapen cookie he'd saved from the pastry chef. For the little one, he'd whisper in his heavily accented English. Tonight the kitchen was a pressure cooker. The chefs barked orders, pans hissed, and the ticket machine spat out an endless ribbon of demands. Carlos was moving slower than usual. A deep weariness etched into the lines on his face. He fumbled a stack of clean, heavy ceramic plates. One slid from the top, wobbled in the air for a heart-topping second, and then shattered on the tile floor with a sound that made everyone flinch. It was just a plate, a $12 plate, replaceable and insignificant. But it was the exact moment that all Alaric Croft chose to push through the swinging kitchen doors. Alaric Croft was not a man accustomed to the word no. His world was a landscape of acquisitions, mergers, and hostile takeovers. His name was a headline in the Wall Street Journal, his face a stern, handsome mask on the cover of Forbes. At 35, he commanded an Emma built by his father and ruthlessly expanded by him. Croft Enterprises was a monolith of steel data and unforgiving ambition. But today the monolith had cracked. A multi-billion-dollar deal in Asia One he had staked his reputation on had collapsed spectacularly at the 11th hour due to a betrayal by a trusted lieutenant. It wasn't just about the money, it was a public humiliation. It was a stain on his father's legacy. He had spent the afternoon in a sterile boardroom, his voice a low, dangerous weapon as he dismantled the careers of those responsible. But it hadn't quelled the furious, acidic rage churning in his gut. He had come to Aria, his father's favorite restaurant, seeking a ghost of comfort, a taste of a time when things were simpler. But the food was tasteless, the wine sour. The failure followed him, clinging to him, like the scent of ozone after a lightning strike. He felt a desperate primal need to exert control over something, to find one thing in his universe that was out of place and fix it with brute force. He stormed towards the restroom, but the sound of the shattering plate diverted him. It was a discordant note in a place of perfect harmony, an imperfection, an error. It was a target for his free-floating fury. He pushed through the kitchen doors without thinking, his thousand suit, a jarring intrusion in the world of stainless steel and sweat. And there it was, the source of the discord, an old man fumbling with the broken shards of porcelain, his hands trembling, pathetic, inefficient, a failure. What is the meaning of this? Croft's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the kitchen's den like a shard of glass. Every person in the kitchen froze. The chefs looked down at their cutting boards. The prep cook suddenly found a bin of vegetables fascinating. Carlos looked up, his face ashen, his eyes wet with the universal fear of the powerless confronted by the powerful. I am sorry, sir. It slipped. Carlos stammered, bending to pick up the pieces. It slipped. Croft repeated the words, dripping with contempt. He took a step closer, looming over the stooped man. A $12 plate, and it slipped. Is this the level of competence we're dealing with here? Do you have any idea what it costs to run a place like this? The margins, the standards, or are you just too inept to hold a stack of plates? The attack was so disproportionate, so venomous that it sucked the very air out of the room. Carlos flinched back as if he'd been physically struck. His eyes welled with tears of humiliation. This was the scene Ella walked into. She was coming to drop off a tray of dirty glasses, her mind already on the next table's order. She saw all Alaric Croft, a man she recognized from the city society pages, a titan of industry, and she saw Carlos, a kind old man who gave her daughter cookies, cowering before him. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around. This is not your fight. You have a child. You need this job. Don't look. Walk away. Losing this job wasn't an inconvenience. It was a catastrophe. It meant the difference between affording Lily's next round of treatments and not. It was the roof over their heads. But then she looked at Carlos's face at the raw shame and fear. She saw the tremor in his hands. And in that moment, she didn't just see a dishwasher. She saw every person who had ever been made to feel small, worthless, and disposable. She saw herself smiling through clenched teeth as a patron dismissed her with a wave of his hand. She saw the art professor who told her that a single mother had no business trying to be a serious artist, and something inside her, the part of her that dreamed in oil paints and charcoal, the part that hadn't yet been crushed by life, snapped. She placed her tray down with a soft, deliberate click. She took a breath and she stepped forward. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet but clear, "it was an accident." Croft's head whipped around, his gaze cold and furious, locked onto her. "Who are you?" "My name is Ella. I'm a server here," she said, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She kept her eyes steady on his. He said he was sorry. It was a simple mistake. A dangerous smirk played on Croft's lips. He seemed almost pleased to have a new target. A mistake. In my world, mistakes have consequences. Incompetence has a price. This man is a liability. This man is Carlos, Ella said, her voice gaining strength. She took another small step, positioning herself slightly in front of the still crouching dishwasher. He's a person, a hardworking person, not a line item on a balance sheet, and he deserves to be treated with respect. The audacity of it silenced the kitchen completely. A waitress was lecturing Alaric Croft. It was like a sparrow trying to stop a hawk. Croft's eyes narrowed into slits. The rage he'd been carrying all day had found its focus. It was no longer about a broken plate or a failed deal. It was about this woman, this nobody in a cheap black dress daring to challenge him. Respect, he hissed, taking a step toward her. Respect is earned. It's earned through excellence, through perfection, not by dropping things and costing your employer money. You should be more worried about your own job than his. The threat hung in the air, heavy and sharp. This was her chance to back down, to apologize, to save herself. She could feel Mr. Sterling's panicked energy from the dining room, probably already on his way back. She thought of Lily's small, trusting face, but then she looked past Croft's shoulder and saw Carlos, who had slowly, shakily gotten back to his feet. He was watching her, and in his eyes there was no longer just fear. There was a flicker of something else, gratitude, a touch of awe. She had to see it through. "My job is to serve food," Ella said, her voice ringing with a conviction she didn't know she possessed. "It's not to stand by while a good man is humiliated for no reason. This is not about a plate, sir. It's about decency, and that doesn't have a price tag." For a moment, Alaric Croft was utterly speechless. No one had spoken to him like that since his father died. He was so taken aback, so completely blindsided by her unwavering stare, and the sheer unadulterated steel in her voice, that his rage momentarily flickered out, replaced by a cold, shocking blankness. He just stared at her. He saw her name tag, Ella. He saw the faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes, and he saw the absolute absence of fear. Without another word, he turned on his heel and strode out of the kitchen, pushing past a pale, frantic Mr. Sterling, who had just arrived. He threw a few hundred bills on his table, not even waiting for the check, and swept out of Aria, leaving a wake of stunned silence and the lingering electric tension of a battle that felt both over and just beginning. Ella's legs suddenly felt like jelly. The adrenaline drained away, leaving a cold, sickening dread in its place. Mr. Sterling's face, a mask of pure fury, turned to her. "My office!" Now he seethed. Ella knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that she had just thrown her daughter's future away for a $12 plate. The walk to Mr. Sterling's office was the longest of Ella's life. The ambient sounds of the dining room seemed to mock her, a chorus of a life she was about to be ejected from. Her mind raced, a frantic slideshow of unpaid bills, prescription refills, and Lily's pale face in the dim light of her bedroom. Sterling's office was small and immaculate, much like the man himself. He didn't invite her to sit. He stood behind his desk, his knuckles white as he gripped its polished edge. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he began, his voice a low, controlled tremor. "I was defending Carlos. He was being... I don't care." Sterling snapped his composure, finally breaking. That was all Alaric Croft, not some tourist from Ohio. That man's breakfast is worth more than this entire restaurant's payroll for a month. He is a kingmaker in this city, and you, a waitress, decided to give him a lecture on decency. He said the word as if it were a piece of garbage in his mouth. The way he was speaking to him was wrong. "What's wrong is you jeopardizing this entire establishment. What's wrong is you forgetting your place," he spat. "I should fire you on the spot." Ella braced for the words, her stomach clenched. "Are you?" Sterling hesitated. A flicker of something, confusion perhaps, crossed his face. He stared at her, then at the door as if expecting Croft to reappear. "I get out of my sight. Finish your shift. We will discuss your future in the morning." Ella stumbled out of the office, bewildered. She wasn't fired. Not yet. It was a stay of execution. But why Sterling was a man who acted decisively to cut out any perceived problem. The reprieve made no sense, and that was almost more terrifying than being fired outright. She finished her shift in a daze. The other staff avoided her eyes, some with pity, some with a kind of fearful respect. Only Carlos caught her as she was leaving. He grabbed her hand, his own still trembling slightly. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "No one has ever." "Thank you, Ella." The sincerity in his voice was a small, warm cold in the freezing cavern of her fear. She managed a weak smile and fled into the cool night air. Meanwhile, in a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, Alaric Croft was pouring his third glass of Macallan 25. The fire in his gut had been replaced by a cold, unsettling quiet. He kept replaying the scene in his mind. Not his tirade, not Carlos's fear, but the waitress, Ella. Her defiance was like a splash of ice water. He was surrounded by sycophants, by people who lived in terror of his moods. His own board members would rather agree with a bad idea than voice a dissenting opinion. And this woman with everything to lose had stood her ground over a principle. "He's a person, not a line item on a balance sheet." The words echoed, laced with an uncomfortable familiarity. It was something his father would have said. His father, a man who built the empire with handshake deals and a fierce loyalty to his employees, had always told him, "Alaric, never forget the people who sweep the floors. They're the foundation everything else is built on." It was a lesson Alaric, in his relentless pursuit of expansion, had long since dismissed as sentimental nonsense. He felt a sliver of shame, an emotion so foreign to him it was physically uncomfortable. His anger at Carlos was a pathetic projection of his own failure. The waitress had seen it. She had held up a mirror to him, and he hadn't liked the reflection. He picked up his phone. He didn't call his brokers or his legal team. He called Evelyn Hayes, his chief of staff, a woman whose efficiency and discretion were legendary. "Evelyn," he said, his voice flat, "I need you to find out everything you can about a woman named Ella Jensen. She's a waitress at Area on the Upper East Side. Problem? Mr. Croft?" Evelyn's voice was calm, professional. "No, an anomaly," he replied, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "And I want to know about the restaurant's dishwasher, an older man named Carlos. And while you're at it, do a deep dive on the restaurant's management, specifically a man named Sterling. I'll have a preliminary report on your desk by morning," she said. "Make it thorough," Alaric said and hung up. He didn't know what he was looking for, but for the first time in a long time, he was intrigued by something that had nothing to do with a stock price or a market share. He was intrigued by a woman who had nothing and had risked it all. The next morning, Ella dropped Lily at a neighbor's house. The dread of her meeting with Sterling, a physical weight in her chest. She arrived at Aria half an hour early. Her resignation letter typed on her old clunky laptop folded in her purse. She decided she would quit before he could fire her. It was the only shred of dignity she had left to cling to. She walked into Sterling's office without knocking. He looked up surprised. He looked tired and nervous, his usual smugness gone. "Ella, I was about to call you," he said, his tone strangely placating. "There's no need, Mr. Sterling." "I'm resigning," she said, pulling the letter from her purse. "No, wait," he said quickly, holding up a hand. "Let's not be hasty. About last night, I may have overreacted. You're a good employee, punctual, reliable. We value that." Ella stared at him, utterly baffled. This was a complete reversal. Yesterday, he looked ready to have her thrown out on the street. "What's going on?" she asked, her suspicion overriding her relief. "Nothing's going on," he said a little too quickly. "Corporate is just reviewing some things. Standard procedure, and they feel it would be a bad look to have any staffing changes right now. So your job is safe. In fact, let's forget the whole thing ever happened." He gave her that cold smile again, but this time she could see the panic behind it. She left the office more confused than ever. Her job was safe. Why? What had changed overnight? The explanation felt thin, brittle. Something else was happening, something she couldn't see. The answer was sitting in a leather-bound folder on all Alaric Croft's desk 100 blocks downtown. Evelyn Hayes had been, as always, exceptionally thorough. The report detailed Ella's life with stark, unpitting clarity. The art scholarship to RISD deferred. The birth of Lily. The diagnosis, cystic fibrosis-related bronchiectasis, a chronic condition requiring lifelong management and expensive medications. The mountain of medical debt tracked through collection agencies and credit reports. The sale of personal assets, including a professional-grade easel and art supplies. It was a portrait of a dream systematically dismantled by love and necessity. The file on Carlos was shorter, but just as poignant. Photos of the family in El Salvador he supported, the consistent, humble wire transfers he made every single month without fail. A commendation from a previous employer for 20 years of perfect attendance. And then there was the file on Mr. Sterling. That was the most interesting of all. It detailed a pattern of skimming from suppliers, padding invoices, and shorting employees on overtime pay, including Ella and Carlos. He was a small-time tyrant and a thief, stealing from both the corporation above him and the workers below him. Alaric read it all, his face unreadable. He looked at the photo Evelyn had included in Ella's file, a candid shot of her pushing Lily on a swing in a small rundown park. Her face, caught in a moment of unguarded joy, was luminous. It was the face of the woman who had once dreamed of painting sunsets. He closed the folder. The unsettling quiet in his mind was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The world he inhabited was full of sharks and snakes. He was one of them. But this woman, this Ella Jensen, was something else entirely. She was made of a different material. He knew what he had to do. It was a bold, unconventional, and deeply personal move. It was the kind of move his father would have made. 2 days after Ella's bizarre non-firing, the universe tilted again. The lunch rush was at its zenith, a chaotic ballet of clattering plates, demanding patrons, and the ceaseless chatter of the city's well-fed. Ella moved through it like a ghost, her mind still replaying Sterling's strange reversal, a sense of unease clinging to her like a second skin. She was balancing a tray laden with 3 lobster bisques and a Caesar salad, navigating a narrow gap between tables when the hostess called out, her voice cutting through the din. "Jensen front desk. Line 1 for you." The tray wobbled in her hands. A phone call during a shift was a cardinal sin in Sterling's book, only permissible for the dearest of emergencies. And for Ella, there was only one emergency that mattered. Her blood ran cold, a familiar icy dread gripping her heart. Lily. Something had happened to Lily. She all but shoved the heavy tray into the arms of a startled busboy. "Take this to table 7, she commanded, her voice tight with panic, and sprinted towards the hostess stand, ignoring the curious and annoyed glances of the patrons. She dodged. Her hands were trembling as she grabbed the receiver. "Hello?" she gasped, her breath catching in her throat. "Is this about Lily? Is she okay?" There was a brief, sterile pause on the other end. "Your daughter is fine, Miss Jensen." The voice that answered was female, impossibly calm, and polished to a high sheen like a river stone, smoothed by a millennium of current. It was a voice that belonged to a world of boardrooms and private jets, not busy restaurants. "My name is Evelyn Hayes. I am the Chief of Staff for Mr. Alaric Croft." The name landed like a physical blow. Alaric Croft. Ella froze. The receiver clamped to her ear, the chaotic noise of the restaurant fading into a dull roar. Her mind scrambled for a logical explanation and found none. Was this a follow-up to her confrontation? A lawsuit? A formal, cruel way of being fired? "I don't understand," she stammered, her mind a blank wall of confusion. "Mr. Croft would like to meet with you." Evelyn Hayes continued, her tone unwavering. "He has asked if you would be available to come to his office at Croft Enterprises headquarters at 4:00 this afternoon." It was phrased as a question, but it felt like a royal decree, a summons. "To what do I owe this?" "Honor." Ella asked the word honor, dripping with an irony she couldn't suppress. "He wishes to discuss a business proposition," Evelyn said smoothly, betraying no reaction to Ella's tone. "A car will be waiting for you outside the restaurant at 3:45. Your manager, Mr. Sterling, has already been informed and has approved your leave for the remainder of the day." The line went dead with a soft click. Ella stood motionless, the dead phone in her hand, feeling as though she'd been struck by lightning in a windowless room. A car, a business proposition. Sterling knew the ground beneath her feet, already unsteady, had just given way entirely. The next 2 hours were a surreal torment. The restaurant became a theater of whispers and stares. Her fellow servers, who had given her a wide berth for 2 days, now watched her with a mixture of awe and morbid curiosity, their hushed conversations ceasing whenever she drew near. She was no longer just Ella the waitress. She was the woman who had stared down at Titan and somehow survived to be summoned to his lair. Mr. Sterling was the most unnerving of all. He hovered at the edge of the dining room, avoiding her gaze but tracking her every move. His usual smug arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a sheen of cold sweat on his brow and a palpable twitching anxiety. He looked like a man watching a guillotine being assembled in his honor. He knew this summons wasn't about her. It was about him. At precisely 3:45 p.m., a machine of silent black perfection purred to a stop at the curb outside area. It wasn't a taxi. It was a town car, a long, sleek vessel of tinted glass and polished chrome that seemed to absorb the city's noise and light. The driver, a broad-shouldered man in a crisp suit and sunglasses, exited the vehicle and opened the rear door for her. His movements economical and precise. Ella, still in her slightly stained black uniform and sensible shoes, felt a blush of humiliation crawl up her neck. She was a servant about to step into the chariot of a king. She slid into the plush, leather interior, the door closing behind her with a soft, expensive sigh, sealing her off from the familiar world of swarms and shouting. The journey downtown was a trip through a looking glass. The city she knew, a gritty, exhausting obstacle course transformed into a silent film viewed through the thick tinted window. The car smelled of new leather and a faint, clean scent that was probably just the smell of money. Ella smoothed down her apron, a useless, reflexive gesture. She felt like an imposter, a smudge on the pristine interior. What could Alaric Croft possibly want with her? The question beat against her skull like a trapped moth. Croft Enterprises' headquarters was not a building. It was a statement, a spear of smoked glass and obsidian steel that clawed at the sky, designed to make anyone who entered feel small and insignificant. It succeeded. The lobby was a vast, cold cathedral of white marble and intimidatingly massive abstract art. The air was still and cool, the only sound the soft, respectful footfalls on the polished floor. It was the quietest place Ella had been in for years. Evelyn Hayes met her at the base of the elevator bank. In person, she was even more formidable than her voice suggested. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her demeanor radiating a calm, unshakable competence. She was the polar opposite of Ella's frayed nerves existence. "Ms. Jensen, thank you for coming," Evelyn said, her smile polite but impersonal. She led Ella not to the main bank of elevators, but to a discreet, unmarked door that opened to reveal a private car. "Mr. Croft is waiting for you." The ascent was silent and so fast it made Ella's stomach lurch. All Alaric Croft's office was designed to communicate one thing: power. It was larger than Ella's entire apartment, with a desk so vast and empty it looked like a black hole. But the desk was not the focal point. The entire west wall was a single sheet of floor, tocilling glass offering a breathtaking godlike panorama of the city sprawling below. He wasn't behind the desk. He was standing before the window, hands clasped behind his back, a dark silhouette against the afternoon sun. He turned as she entered. He had shed the armor of his expensive suit. He was dressed in a simple dark cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. The raw, predatory anger she had seen in the kitchen was gone, replaced by a quiet, unnerving intensity. His gaze was sharp, assessing. "Miss Jensen, thank you for coming," he said, his voice calm and even. He gestured towards one of two plush leather chairs that faced the window, not the desk. "Please have a seat." Ella's survival instincts, honed by years of navigating precarious situations, screamed at her. She did not sit. She crossed her arms over her chest, a small, defiant gesture of self-preservation. "Mr. Croft, I don't understand why I'm here. If this is about what happened in the kitchen, I want you to know that I stand by what I said." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his lips. "I have no doubt that you do. That's precisely why you're here." He walked not towards her, but towards the massive desk. He picked up a slim black envelope and held it out. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. Ella hesitated for a beat, her eyes flickering from his face to the envelope before taking it. Her name, Ella Jensen, was embossed in elegant silver script on the front. Her fingers, calloused from work, trembled as she broke the seal. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, lay a card. It was not plastic. It was a solid piece of sleek, anodized titanium, cool and heavy in her hand. It was completely black, marked only with his name in a small embedded chip. There were no numbers, no expiration date. She recognized it from articles she'd skimmed online during late nights. The American Express Centurion card, the mythical black card, an artifact of a world so far removed from her own, it might as well have been alien. A wave of dizziness washed over her. She looked up from the impossible object in her hand to his face. "This is a joke. I don't joke about money." "Ms. Jensen Croft," said, his voice hardening slightly. "That card is in your name. It has been activated. It has no preset spending limit." Ella stared at him, her mind a frantic stuttering engine that couldn't process the input. "Why? Why would you? I can't accept this. This is insane." "I don't think you understand," he said, turning from her and beginning to pace slowly before the vast window. "This isn't charity. It's a job offer." He stopped his back to her, looking out at the city he owned. "For the past 5 years since my father died, I have been running his company. My sole focus has been on one thing: growth, profit expansion. I became very, very good at it," he said, his voice tinged with a self-aware bitterness. "And in the process, I also became something else. I became the man you saw in that kitchen, a man who would humiliate a good person over a broken plate because of a failure that was his own." He turned to face her, his eyes locking onto hers. "You, Ms. Jensen," held up a mirror. "And you reminded me of something I had worked very hard to forget. That integrity is a more valuable asset than any stock or holding, that a person's dignity is not a commodity to be traded." He walked back to the desk and gestured to a leather-bound folder she hadn't noticed before. "Her folder. I had my team look into you. I know about your scholarship to the Rhode Island School of Design. I know about your daughter Lily and her condition. I know about the debt. I know you sold your easel. I know you gave up your dream to give her a chance to live. That is a kind of strength my world knows nothing about." His gaze shifted to a second identical folder. "Starings. I also know that your boss has been skimming from suppliers, padding invoices, and stealing overtime from his employees. From you, from Carlos. He was a petty thief hiding in plain sight. He will be dealt with." In fact, he added a glint of steel in his eyes as, of an hour ago, Croft Enterprises finalized the acquisition of the restaurant group that owns Aria. "Your former boss is now my former employee." Ella's jaw literally dropped. The room seemed to tilt. "I am starting a new philanthropic division of my company," Croft continued, his voice gaining a new energy. "The Croft Family Foundation. Its sole mission will be to provide direct, immediate, no red tape assistance to families who fall through the cracks. Families crushed by medical debt, parents who have to sacrifice their own futures to save their children. It will be a foundation built on the very principle of decency you were willing to lose your job over." He stopped directly in front of her again, so close she could see the faint lines around his eyes. "And I want you to run it." The words didn't register at first. They were just sounds. Then they coalesced into a concept so ludicrous, so impossible that she felt a bubble of hysterical laughter rise in her throat. "Run at me. I'm a waitress." "You were an art student," he countered, his voice low and intense. "You're a mother who has fought a battle I can't even imagine. And you're the only person I have met in 10 years who had the courage to tell me the unvarnished truth to my face when I was in the wrong. I don't need another MBA in a suit for this, Ella. I need a person with a moral compass that doesn't break. I need you." He pointed to the black card still clutched in her hand. "That is your first tool, your signing bonus. Your first task is to get your daughter the best medical care on the planet. I don't care where it is or what it costs. Fly her to any specialist anywhere in the world. Eliminate your debt. Buy back your easel. Find a home where she can breathe clean air. And you can have a studio with a window." His voice was a rapid-fire series of commands, each one dismantling a wall of her prison. "Your second task is to show up here on Monday morning and help me build this foundation from the ground up. You will have my full resources, a dedicated team, and a clear mandate to actually do good, not just posture for tax breaks. The hysterical laughter died in her throat, replaced by a flood of emotion so powerful it buckled her knees. Tears began to stream down her face, hot and silent. It was too much. It was a fantasy, a fever dream. It was the sudden, blinding arrival of a dawn she had long ago stopped believing would ever come. Why? She whispered the single word. A vessel for a universe of disbelief and fragile, terrifying hope. All Alaric Croft's intense expression softened for the first time. He looked past her out the window at the sprawling city below. Because my father always said, the best investment you can ever make is in people. I've spent my life investing in companies. It's time for a change in my portfolio. He turned his gaze back to her. You're my first new investment, Ella. Please don't prove me wrong. For the first time, she saw past the billionaire, past the titan of industry, past the monster from the kitchen. She saw a man burdened and lost, trying to find his way back to something human. She looked down at the heavy black card in her hand. It wasn't just metal and money. It was a key, a weapon, a promise. It was the end of her life as she knew it, and the terrifying, brilliant, unbelievable beginning of a new one. She took a ragged breath, looked him straight in the eye, and slowly, deliberately nodded. Okay. The hours after leaving all Alaric Croft's office were a disorienting dream. Ella sat in the back of the town car, the city lights smearing into abstract ribbons of color. The heavy titanium card feeling both impossibly real and like a prop from a movie. The weight of it in her palm was the only thing that kept her grounded. It wasn't just a card, it was a tectonic shift. It was the end of if only and the beginning of what now. Her first instinct was a lifetime of scarcity, wearing with this sudden, ludicrous abundance. Part of her wanted to hide the card, to pretend it didn't exist, to go back to the familiar, miserable calculus of her old life. But then she thought of Lily's labored breathing in the middle of the night, a sound that had been the soundtrack to her fears for years. That thought, as always, was the catalyst. It pushed her past the fear. Back in her tiny apartment with Lily asleep in the next room, Ella sat at her wobbly kitchen table. The black card lay before her like a dark mirror. She took a deep breath and made the first call, not to a realtor, not to a bank, but to the administrative office of the country's top pediatric pulmonology clinic in Denver. Her voice trembled on the first few words. She was so used to being put on hold to being asked for insurance numbers that would be rejected to pleading. I need an immediate comprehensive consultation for my daughter Lily Jensen, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. The polite woman on the other end began the familiar script. Of course. What is your insurance provider? That won't be necessary, Ella said the words, feeling alien and powerful. I'll be paying for everything privately. We will also need to charter a private medical flight from New York. A pause. The clicking of a keyboard. The woman's tone shifted from professionally courteous to attentively differential. I see. Of course, Miss Jensen. One moment. Within hours, a world Ella never knew existed had mobilized for her. A concierge medical service, the kind that catered to royalty, and CEOs had arranged everything. The next morning, a sleek, Gulfstream jet staffed with a kindly-faced nurse who showed Lily how the windows worked, waited on a private tarmac. As Ella and a wide-eyed, giggling Lily ascended into the clouds, leaving the gray city behind, Ella felt the crushing weight that had lived in her chest for years begin to dissipate molecule by molecule. This silent, smooth ascent through the brilliant blue sky was the opposite of her life until now, a slow, grinding descent. The clinic in Denver was a sanctuary of hushed tones, natural light, and quiet competence. There were no crowded waiting rooms, no harried receptionists. A team of doctors, the leading experts in their field, sat with her for 2 hours. They spoke not of managing a chronic condition, but of transformative therapies, of new medications that could regenerate lung tissue, of environmental changes that would give Lily a life unbound from inhalers and fear. They presented a future for her daughter Ella had never dared to dream of. The cost was a number with so many zeros, it seemed abstract. Ella looked at the head specialist, took the black card from her wallet, and slid it across the table. "Whatever it takes," she said, her voice not even trembling. For the first time in years, she cried tears not of despair, but of overwhelming, gut-wrenching relief. While Lily began her first round of revolutionary new treatments, Ella sat in the quiet of a hotel suite that was larger than her old apartment. With the first part of her promise fulfilled, she turned to the second. She dialed Carlos's number. "Carlos, it's Ella." "Ella, I was so worried. Are you okay? Did that man Sterling?" "I'm fine." "Carlos, Sterling is gone," she said softly. "Listen, things have changed. The restaurant has a new owner, and he wants to make things right. Starting with you." She explained the offer a new role as the daytime logistical coordinator, a manager-level salary, full health benefits for him and his wife, and most importantly, paid vacation time so he could finally visit his family in El Salvador. There was a long silence on the other end, then a choked sob. "Ella, why?" "Because you're a good man, Carlos," she said, her own eyes welling up. "And you deserve to be treated with respect." She had used her new power not just to save her daughter, but to honor the dignity of the man whose humiliation had started it all. The circle felt complete. A week later, they returned to New York. The driver took them not to their old walk-up, but to a sun-drenched penthouse apartment in a modern building overlooking the Hudson River. It had been leased on Evelyn Hayes's practical advice, complete with a hospital-grade air purification system. Lily ran from room to room, her laughter echoing in the vast empty spaces, her breathing easy and clear. Ella walked into what would be her room and saw that a delivery had already been made. In the center of the room, by a wall of glass that bathed the space in golden afternoon light, stood a brand new, beautifully crafted wooden easel. Ella walked towards it as if in a trance. She ran her hand over the smooth sanded wood, inhaling the scent of canvas and possibility. This wasn't just a replacement for the easel she had sold. It was a resurrection. It was the tangible proof that she had not just survived, but reclaimed the part of herself she had sacrificed. On Monday, Ella Jensen walked through the marble lobby of Croft Enterprises. She wore a simple but elegant silk dress, her posture straight, her gaze direct. She was no longer a waitress entering a foreign world. She was the executive director of the Croft Family Foundation, and she was home. Her new office was adjacent to Alaric's, but it was her own space, warm, inviting with a stunning view of Central Park. Waiting for her was Evelyn and a small, fiercely intelligent team of analysts and social workers, each handpicked for their integrity and passion. The work was exhilarating. Ella's greatest asset was not the limitless budget, but her own lived experience. She understood the crushing shame of poverty, the bureaucratic brick walls designed to keep people out, the quiet terror of a parent facing a child's illness alone. She tore down those walls, creating a foundation that operated with the speed and precision of a special ops team. They didn't have application forms. They had intervention plans. They didn't just write checks. They secured housing, paid off predatory medical debt, funded specialist tutors, and provided the kind of holistic support that changed the entire trajectory of a family's life. Her relationship with Alaric Croft settled into a comfortable, profound respect. He was her chairman and mentor in the cutthroat language of his world, but she was his guide in the rediscovered language of humanity. He would often appear in her doorway late in the afternoon, his corporate armor shed, and simply listen as she spoke about a family they had helped, a child's life they had saved. He saw the numbers on his spreadsheets turn into faces, into stories. She was, he admitted, to Evelyn one night after a particularly long board meeting, the best investment he had ever made. Months later, Alaric found her in her office long after the rest of the team had gone home. She was at her desk sketching furiously in a notepad, not art, but a flowchart for a new citywide outreach program. He watched her for a moment, the focused intensity, the confident grace of her hand as it moved across the page. "You know," he said quietly, leaning against the doorframe, "the first time I saw you, I saw a waitress. I was wrong." Ella looked up, a genuine, untired smile spreading across her face. She pushed a stray strand of hair from her eyes. "And the first time I saw you, I saw a monster," she replied. "I think we were both a little bit wrong. She had her daughter's health. She had a home that felt safe. She had a purpose that resonated in her soul. And in her art studio, the massive canvas still stood on its easel. It was still blank, a vast field of intimidating luminous white. She hadn't yet dared to make the first mark, but the fear was gone, replaced by a quiet anticipation. She was no longer a ghost of the artist she had been. She was someone new, someone stronger. She was gathering her colors, preparing her composition, and waiting for the right moment to paint not just a sunset, but a whole new dawn. Ella's story isn't just about a black card or a billionaire. It's a powerful reminder that our true worth isn't in our bank account or our job title, but in our character. It's about the incredible power of a single act of courage and the ripple effect of standing up for someone's dignity. In a world that often feels transactional, Ella chose to be decent. And in doing so, she didn't just change her own life. She unlocked a wave of good she never could have imagined. Her story proves that you never know how much strength you have until you're called to use it. If this story inspired you or restored a little bit of your faith in humanity, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with a friend, and subscribing to the channel for more incredible true life stories. What was your favorite moment? Let us know in the comments below.